I'm from Tehran, columnist and commentator, Mr. Nader Mokhtari. And from Arlington, Virginia, former U.S. Senator Mike Gravel by phone. Welcome, both of you, to the program. Starting off in Tehran, Mr. Mokhtari, how significant is it that these submarines have been domestically made?
It is significant that they're domestically made, but Iran has forayed into building its own defense hardware for quite a while now, ever since the Iran-Iraq war. It is just that the level of sophistication and capability built into the new equipment is unprecedented, and the exploration of new technologies is also unprecedented. Iran has learned not to rely on international weapons, on international arms markets for its military hardware, and it's learnt so the hard way. So it is just continuing along the lines of its own defense doctrines on the issue. It is not. Iran does not feel that it's too good to be dependent on overseas hardware in terms of its defense.
Okay, turn to Mr. Gravel. Now, do you see the launching of the subs and promises of more to follow? Do you look at it as a defensive deterrent, or do you think that some could read it in a different way, perhaps Tehran flexing its muscles?
No, I think it's a legitimate defense mechanism. They're shallow subs. They're not the Trident class like the Israel is reported to have stationed in the Persian Gulf. Certainly, they're not as oppressive or a projection of power like having a aircraft carrier fleet in the Persian Gulf. I see nothing wrong about Iran, which has a very large stake in export through the Persian Gulf, providing the necessary security. Who says that the only security has to come from the West? The West, who has imperial ambitions in this part of the world.
Well, let's look at that, Mr. Mokhtari. Mr. Gravel has just said, he says, who says that security has to only come from the West? And actually, Iran's defense minister, Ahmed Vahidi, said today that basically that it should only be Iran and its neighbors protecting the Persian Gulf. Do you see that this may be a point of conflict? Because the United States has said that it has to keep the Strait of Hormuz open because, of course, the majority of the world's oil, a lot of the oil is coming from this region. Do you see that this is a possible point of conflict for Iran and the United States?
It has always been so in the past. The Western powers have been replaced. Iran had points of conflict with Rome in the Persian Gulf, with various the Portuguese, the British. It has always been a point of conflict because it is such a strategic a body of water. Now the United States is the world superpower, and we see friction as a result. But the fact of the matter is that really the Persian Gulf littoral countries should be allowed to have a greater say, and should have a greater say in maintaining security, because, as the gentleman pointed out, their own vital trade interests lies in keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and keeping conflict away from the Persian Gulf, whereas the U.S. presence has brought conflict time and again to the area. Having said that, there are many issues among the countries, the Persian Gulf littoral countries, that they have to sort out among themselves. And this has also been a major sticking point in the historic affairs of the body of water. In other words, if the Persian Gulf littoral countries can sort out petty squabbles and can sort out a trade and transport regime that they can stick to, I don't see any reason why they cannot take care of the security and stability of the region themselves. They don't need a prefect from 11,000 miles away.
Okay, now, Mr. Gravel, Iran has just been hit with the fourth round of UN sanctions. How significant is that, despite these sanctions that have been in place, that Iran has been able to advance militarily?
Very significant. But before I comment on that, I just want to comment on the gentleman's statement about the literal countries. And he's totally correct. I would hope that Iran would take the initiative and develop a conference of literal countries whose only goal is the security of the Gulf and sign agreements, and that way the presence of other interests would embarrass the countries that do that. Now, with respect to the sanctions, this is very tragic, particularly in my mind in the United States, because President Obama has not disassociated himself with the bellicose comments of Prime Minister Netanyahu and a group of Republicans and some Democrats in the Congress who have passed a resolution in trying to incite an attack on Iran. This is very tragic. Iran is not pursuing anything that is, one, illegal or immoral in its nuclear efforts. Under Article 4 of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, any country is entitled to pursue the generation of nuclear power. I particularly disagree with that power worldwide, but Iran has the legitimate power to do that. And morally, it is not a threat to Israel or the United States or anybody else. To be making a missile shield program in Europe or the United States because we're afraid of an Iranian attack is absolutely ridiculous. And yet this threat is advertised in our newspapers to create among the American public a sense of reality of a threat that does not exist.
Now, Mr. Mokhtari, let's look at the sanctions themselves. Do you think that it has actually helped Iran to concentrate more on domestically made, let's say, products or, let's say, for its defense capabilities because of feeling like it could not rely on the international community? How do you see that these sanctions have played itself out in Iran itself, especially looking at its military capabilities?
Well, the Iranian military, as I mentioned, during the Iran-Iraq war, learned very, very quickly that they cannot in any way rely on assistance forthcoming from overseas, especially if they're at odds politically, economically, with the very people who are the suppliers of those weapons. Therefore, a weapons industry and a very capable defense industry in the region has been developed over the years, and it's been getting better and better. It is not that Iran produces the most sophisticated weapons. It is not that Iran produces the most capable weapons. But the fact is that from the grassroots up, Iranians know how their own weapons work, and experience has shown that they are far more comfortable with their own hardware than they are with things they have to import. There is a lot of disgruntlement with some of the hardware that has come from overseas, both from the East and the West. Despite their sophistication, they have not proven their worth in the field. So Iranians tend to go to the devil they know, if I may use the term, and prefer their own hardware. The thing is that Iran ought to really, the defense industry itself is the sort of animal that cannot be relied on purely for domestic use. And if Iran expands to supply arms overseas, then it would be playing the same role that perhaps the West and the East have been playing, and that would be going against the principles of the revolution itself. So it is a difficult balance to strike. However, we cannot take this away that having manufactured such submarines with other larger, more capable submarines on the way, warships, and aircraft to a certain extent, Iran is now well on its way to be sufficient in the field. However, it is an interconnected world, and technologies do need to come from overseas. And should Iran's positive role be recognized and the Iranian people's positive role and aspirations be recognized in the world, and less slogans be used to describe the country and its people, then first of all, it is much better for the trade. Secondly, Iranians will find it easier to take up a more constructive role on the world arena.
Okay, and on that note, I thank you, Mr. Nader Mokhtari, columnist and commentator from studios here in Tehran, and former U.S. Senator from Arlington, Virginia, Mr. Mike Gravel. Now moving on to our next subject.